The cave smells like ammonia and old rain. Somewhere in the dark, something the size of your thumb is hanging upside down, breathing slow, waiting for the sun to go down. You will never see it clearly. You will only feel it. A flicker past your ear, a shape against the last blue light at the mouth of the cave. And your body already knows what to do with that feeling. It flinches. That flinch is not irrational. Bats have been documented carrying more types of viruses per species than almost any other group of mammals on the planet. Rabies lives in them. Strains of coronavirus have been traced back to them. Some of the deadliest hemorrhagic fevers ever recorded, the filovirus family that includes Ebola, have bat populations sitting at or near the root of their family tree. Scientists still argue over the exact numbers, the exact pathways, the exact species responsible for any one outbreak. Estimates vary, and they vary a lot, because studying a nocturnal, cave-dwelling, migratory animal is nothing like studying a farm animal in a pen. But the pattern holds across decades of research. Bat, for its size, is one of the most efficient viral reservoirs nature has ever produced. You have felt the downstream effects of that fact, even if you never once stepped into a cave. A global pandemic within living memory has been linked, by many researchers, to a spillover event connected to bats. Rabies exposure warnings in your own country almost certainly mention them by name. If you have ever pulled your hand back from an attic vent, a barn rafter, a crack in an old stone wall, that was not superstition. That was 10,000 generations of human instinct doing exactly what it evolved to do. So here is the strange part. Here is the part that does not add up. The same creature capable of carrying diseases that have shaped human history, redirected economies, and taken lives across centuries, is also a creature we cannot survive without. Not metaphorically. Not as a nice sentiment for a nature documentary. Functionally, physically, agriculturally, medically, we depend on bats in ways that would be catastrophic to lose. The animal your ancestors nailed to barn doors to ward off evil is one of the reasons those same ancestors had crops left to harvest in October. The thing you fear in the dark is, in more places than most people realize, the reason the dark is survivable at all. That is the paradox this video sits inside. Not, bats are secretly good, because that is too clean, too easy, and it is not true. Not, bats are dangerous, and that's the whole story, because that is not true either. The honest version is messier. Bats are simultaneously one of the more dangerous disease reservoirs in the mammal kingdom and one of the most quietly essential animals on the planet. And both of those things are true on the same night, in the same cave, sometimes in the same individual animal. Today, we are going to sit inside that contradiction instead of resolving it. We are going to look at why bats carry what they carry, what their bodies are doing that ours cannot, what breaks in the world when they disappear, and what that means for a species, yours, that is currently trying to steal their biological secrets for its own survival. To understand how something can be both a threat and a necessity, you have to understand how long it has been both. Bats are old. Not old the way a redwood is old, not old the way a coral reef took thousands of years to build itself layer by layer. Old the way continents are old. The oldest confirmed bat fossils date back roughly 52 million years, to a small flying creature already so structurally similar to a modern bat that scientists can identify the wing bones on sight. 52 million years ago, there were no humans. There were no apes as you would recognize them. Horses were the size of dogs, and bats were already airborne, already using some early form of the sonar they perfected over the tens of millions of years that followed. By the time the first upright hominid left a footprint in African ash, bats had already been flying through the dark for longer than most mammal lineages had existed at all. That is not a small detail. That is the whole reason the paradox exists in the first place. An animal does not get 52 million years of evolutionary runway by accident. Every trait bats carry today, the immune system that shrugs off viral loads that would kill you, the echolocation precise enough to track an insect wingbeat in total darkness, the ability to drop their body temperature and heart rate low enough to survive a winter with almost no food. All of it was pressure-tested across an unimaginable span of time, long before a single human tribe ever told a story about them. And humans did tell stories about them. For almost as long as we have had written language, we have had bats in it, as omens, as demons, as the animal shape a witch or a vampire supposedly took at night. Cultures on different continents that had no contact with each other independently arrived at the same instinct. Something about a flying, screeching, night-dwelling mammal reads to the human brain as unnatural, wrong. A creature that broke a rule it should not have been able to break, since almost no other mammal on Earth achieved true powered flight. You were never taught to fear bats. You inherited it, the same way you inherited a fear of the dark itself. 52 million years of runway is enough time to build something strange. What bats built, somewhere along that stretch, was an immune system that does not behave like anything else in the mammal kingdom. Here is the detail researchers keep circling back to. When your body detects a viral infection, it launches a full-scale response. Inflammation, fever, the recruitment of immune cells that flood the infected area, and, in the process, do a fair amount of damage to your own tissue along the way. That collateral damage is often what actually makes you sick. It is not always the virus itself that puts you in bed for a week. It is your own immune system's scorched earth reaction to it. Bats appear to have found a way around that. Multiple research teams studying species like the Egyptian fruit bat and several horseshoe bat species have found a dampened, almost restrained inflammatory response, even while carrying viral loads that would send a human immune system into overdrive. Their bodies seem to have negotiated a truce with the virus instead of declaring war on it. The infection persists, the damage does not. You feel the opposite of this every time you get sick. The ache in your joints during a fever, the swelling around an infected cut, the exhaustion that follows even a mild cold. That is your immune system fighting a war inside your own house, breaking furniture to get at the intruder. A bat's body appears to negotiate a ceasefire instead, letting the virus stay without letting it cause the kind of damage that turns infection into illness. That single difference is the reason a species can carry pathogens capable of killing you, and, in the same body, at the same time, feel almost nothing. Nobody has fully explained why. That uncertainty is not a gap in the script. It is the honest state of the research. Some scientists point to the physical stress of flight itself as a possible clue. Flight is metabolically brutal. A flying bat's body temperature and metabolic rate spike to levels that, in most mammals, would themselves trigger inflammation and tissue damage, the same way a bad fever does in you. The theory goes that bats may have evolved their unusual tolerance for inflammation simply to survive the act of flying at all, and that same tolerance, built for a completely different reason, happened to make them extraordinarily good at coexisting with viruses as a side effect. If that theory holds, the thing that lets a bat carry a deadly pathogen without symptoms is the exact same adaptation that lets it be the only mammal on Earth capable of true powered flight. The danger and the resilience are not two separate traits sitting side by side. They may be the same trait, viewed from two different angles. That resilience does not stop at infection. It shows up again in how long a bat's body is willing to keep running at all. Body size and lifespan are usually tightly linked across the mammal kingdom. Small body, fast metabolism, short life. That is the rule for almost every rodent on the planet. A mouse burns through its biological budget in roughly 2 years. A bat breaks that rule almost every time. Several species of bat, some no larger than a mouse, are documented living past 30 years in the wild. One small brown bat recaptured by researchers in Siberia was confirmed to be over 41 years old at the time, an animal weighing barely more than a few coins, outliving many dogs, most cats, and every rodent anywhere near its size by a margin of 10 to 20 times over. Relative to body mass, that makes bats among the longest-lived mammals that have ever been studied, standing shoulder to shoulder with animals thousands of times their weight. You do not get that kind of longevity for free. Something in a bat's cells is refusing to degrade the way cells in a same-sized rodent degrade. Researchers studying bat genomes have found unusually active DNA repair mechanisms and telomere maintenance, the molecular processes responsible for keeping a cell's genetic material intact instead of fraying at the edges every time it divides, the fraying that is a large part of what aging actually is at a cellular level. In you, that fraying accumulates year after year until it shows up as wrinkles, slower healing, a body that simply wears down. In a long-lived bat, Something is actively slowing that process down, and nobody has fully mapped out what. This is where the paradox stops being abstract and starts being personal, because human researchers are not studying bat longevity out of pure curiosity. They are studying it because the same cellular repair pathways that let a bat outlive a mouse by 20 times are being examined as potential blueprints for slowing human aging itself. A creature you would flinch away from in a cave is, in a lab a few miles from where you are sitting right now, being read letter by letter for a set of instructions your own species is actively trying to borrow. The same pattern, an ancient adaptation quietly repurposed for modern human benefit, shows up again in the one sense that most defines a bat to begin with: the sound it makes in the dark that you are not built to hear. Echolocation is not a party trick. It is a targeting system precise enough to let a bat track a single moving insect, adjust its flight path in real time, and close the distance in the dark, all within a fraction of a second, using nothing but the timing and pitch of an echo bouncing off a target smaller than your fingertip. That level of precision did not go unnoticed by engineers. Modern sonar systems, first developed for submarines and now used across marine navigation, borrow directly from the frequency-modulated call structure that bats and, separately, dolphins independently evolved. More recently, researchers designing navigation aids for blind and visually impaired people have studied bat echolocation directly, building handheld and wearable devices that translate the same basic principle: send a signal, read the echo, build a mental map of the space, into a tool a person can use to navigate a room or a street without sight. Robotics teams working on obstacle avoidance systems for drones have run the same playbook, training algorithms on the exact call patterns of species like the greater horseshoe bat to build machines that can fly through cluttered, unmapped spaces the way a bat flies through a forest at full speed in pitch darkness. There is a difference between suspecting an animal matters and watching, in real time, what happens when it is taken away. For bats, that evidence did not come from a laboratory experiment. It came from a single cave in New York, in the winter of 2006 into 2007, when researchers found bats dying by the hundreds on a cave floor, their muzzles dusted with a strange white fungus nobody had documented before. The fungus was eventually named the cause of white-nose syndrome, and what it does to a hibernating bat is almost mechanical in its cruelty. It grows across the bat's skin, while the animal sleeps through winter in a state of deep torpor, irritating it just enough to wake it repeatedly during the months it is supposed to remain still. Each unwanted waking burns through fat reserves the bat has no way of replacing, since there are no insects to hunt in the dead of winter. A bat that should sleep through the cold season instead wakes again and again, burning calories it cannot recover, until it starves before spring arrives. Within a handful of years of that first cave discovery, the fungus had spread across dozens of states and into Canada, moving from colony to colony, largely through the bats' own contact with one another, and, researchers believe, on the boots and gear of cave visitors who never suspected they were carrying anything at all. The scale of the die-off is one of the fastest wildlife collapses ever documented in North America. Multiple federal wildlife assessments estimate that more than 6 million bats died from white-nose syndrome in the years following its discovery, with some individual hibernation caves losing over 90% of their population in a single winter. Entire colonies that had used the same caves for generations, caves that had sheltered bats for centuries, were reduced to a scattering of survivors within a few short years. This is not the story of a slow decline measured in incremental estimates. This is a species being watched, cave by cave, as it drops off a cliff. You will notice something disappearing quietly at the edges of that decline, and it will not look like bats at all. It will look like insects. A single small brown bat, the same species researchers found dying in that first affected cave, can eat several thousand mosquito-sized insects in a single night of hunting. Multiply that by a colony of thousands, then multiply again by every affected cave across an entire continent, and the missing predation adds up to a staggering hole torn into local insect control almost overnight. Farmers in regions hit hardest by white-nose syndrome began reporting exactly what you would expect from that missing predation: heavier pest pressure on crops, particularly moths and beetles whose larvae feed directly on corn, cotton and other staple crops that bats had been suppressing for free, every single night, for as long as anyone could remember. A commonly cited economic analysis published in the journal Science estimated that bats collectively save American agriculture somewhere between roughly $3.5 billion and over $50 billion annually in pest control services that would otherwise require chemical intervention, a range that wide specifically because a service this invisible is brutally difficult to measure with precision. But even the low end of that estimate represents an enormous, mostly uncounted subsidy that bats had been providing to farmland for free, indefinitely, without a single invoice ever being sent. Take the bats away, and that invoice finally arrives. Farmers in white-nose-affected regions faced a direct choice: absorb heavier crop losses from pest damage, or increase pesticide applications to compensate for the predator that had vanished from their fields overnight. Either path costs money that used to be spent on nothing at all, because an animal nobody was thanking was quietly doing the job for free. This is the part of the story where the paradox stops being philosophical and becomes arithmetic. The same bat capable of harboring the pathogens discussed earlier in this video is, in the exact same breath, responsible for a pest control service worth billions of dollars a year to the same species that fears it. There is no version of this where you get to keep the benefit and remove the risk. The bat that might carry something dangerous in its blood is the same bat clearing thousands of crop-damaging insects from the air above a cornfield every single night. You do not get to unbundle those two facts. They come from the same animal, sometimes the same wing beat, sometimes the same hour of darkness, and the damage from white nose syndrome did not stop at agriculture. Bats are also significant pollinators and seed dispersers in ecosystems outside temperate farmland, particularly in tropical regions, where certain fruit-bearing plants have evolved to bloom specifically at night, timed to the exact hours when bats, not bees or birds, are the pollinators available to visit them. Agave plants, the source of tequila production in parts of Mexico, rely heavily on nectar-feeding bat species for pollination, since the agave flower opens after dark and produces its nectar on a schedule that matches bat activity almost precisely. Regions that have seen declines in nectar-feeding bat populations have reported corresponding drops in wild agave pollination rates, forcing some producers to consider costly hand pollination as a backup, a labor-intensive process that a single bat colony had been performing for free, night after night, for longer than the tequila industry itself has existed. Picture that cave again, the ammonia smell, the flicker at the edge of your vision, the shape you never quite got a clear look at. Nothing about that cave has changed. The bat hanging in the dark tonight is carrying the same viral load it might have carried at the start of this video, capable of the same harm, wrapped in the same unsettling silence. What has changed is what you now know is happening in the rest of its body, and in the sky above the field a few miles from that cave entrance, while you were not watching. That gap between what an animal seems to be and what it is actually doing is where science currently lives. And nowhere is that gap more active right now than in the research trying to steal the bat's longevity for human use. Laboratories in several countries are actively sequencing bat genomes specifically to study the DNA repair and telomere maintenance mechanisms discussed earlier, hoping to isolate the exact genetic switches responsible for a creature the size of your thumb, outliving animals dozens of times its weight. This is not settled science with a tidy conclusion. Researchers studying bat aging have identified several candidate genes involved in the process, but have not yet been able to fully explain why activating similar pathways in other mammals does not automatically produce the same effect. A mouse given a boost to its DNA repair systems does not simply start living for decades. Something else is happening in a bat's cells, something layered and interconnected, and the honest state of the research is that nobody currently has the full picture. Some of the same institutions studying bat longevity for human anti-aging applications are, in the next lab over, studying the same species' immune tolerance for insights into human autoimmune disease and inflammatory conditions, because the two lines of research keep circling back to the same unresolved question: what is a bat's body actually doing differently, at the molecular level, that lets it hold both a dangerous virus and a 4-decade lifespan inside the same small frame, without either one breaking it down. That is not a mystery with a release date. Nobody can promise you the year this gets solved, or whether it gets solved cleanly at all. 52 million years of evolutionary refinement is not the kind of thing a research grant fully decodes in a decade, and the researchers closest to this work tend to be the ones least willing to promise a breakthrough on a timeline. What they will say, consistently, is that the closer they look, the less this animal resembles either the villain or the hero it keeps getting cast as in the stories told about it. Because that is really the shape of everything this video has been building toward. And it is worth saying plainly, instead of dressing it up, this is not a story with a clean moral at the end. It would be easy, and tempting, to close by saying, bats are actually good, actually misunderstood, actually deserving of a complete reputational reversal, to hand you a tidy bow and let you leave feeling like the fear you inherited was simply a mistake. That would not be honest. The disease reservoir described in the opening of this video is real. The white nose syndrome collapse was a genuine ecological catastrophe, not a redemption arc in disguise. A bat can still bite you. A bat can still carry something your body has no good answer for. None of the evidence in this video cancels out the evidence that came before it. It sits next to it, uncomfortably, the way most true things about the natural world tend to sit. What this video has actually shown you is narrower than a moral, and more useful. An animal can be a genuine biological risk and an irreplaceable ecological asset at the exact same time, in the exact same body, without one fact softening the other. The world was never divided into good animals and bad animals, waiting for humans to sort them correctly. That framework was always too small for what is actually out there. Bats did not change to fit a story. The story simply had not caught up to what bats had been doing in the dark for 52 million years, long before anyone was keeping score. So the next time something flickers past your ear at the mouth of a cave, or drops out of a barn rafter at dusk, or shows up uninvited in an attic vent, you are allowed to flinch. That instinct is old, and it is not wrong. But somewhere behind that flinch, know that the same animal is quietly holding up a piece of the world you live in. A cornfield, a tequila harvest, a laboratory chasing the outline of a cure it has not found yet, and has been holding it up the entire time you were busy being afraid of it. That's where we're going to leave it for today. If a video like this is the kind of thing you want more of, animals that don't fit neatly into hero or villain, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Drop a comment, and tell me which misunderstood creature you want covered next. And if this changed even slightly how you think about the thing hanging in that cave, give it a like on your way out. See you in the next one.